Hey guys, and oh no, it's another tier list. Well, this is one that people have definitely been waiting for. It is going to be my anniversary update December 2020 1v1 Arabia tier list. That's a very long name. But people have been asking for this for a while, and the reason I haven't done this sooner is because there were so many changes with the anniversary update. I really wanted time to sort of like sink into the new civs, or not the new civs, but like what feels like the new civs. Like a lot of big changes happened, and I wanted to be thorough, I guess, and seeing how they played out. I didn't want to like jump to any conclusions, and I want to really, I wanted time to like think it through and experience it, see pro players play them and all that stuff. So it has been 2 months since I last did a 1v1 Arabia tier list, and that was for KOTD, so it's been even longer since I've done one for Ladder Arabia. So we're definitely overdue for an update. And I guess just my usual disclaimer, this is just like my opinion, man, based on me playing at, a reasonably high level. And then, of course, watching and casting and analyzing all a bunch of pro players doing their high level stuffs. So feel free to let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Me ahead of time, I have like put the civs in all their tiers, but I haven't like ranked them. So I will be referring to the finalized list on my other monitor, but I guess it'll be subject to change. And I'm just gonna walk you through everybody, talk about all their strengths and weaknesses and all that stuff. So let's get into it with Aztecs, who received a pretty big nerf in the anniversary update, where they had their carry capacity dropped from 5 to 3. This effectively nerfed their farming rate, especially. Essentially, it was like around 10% faster. Now it's around 5% faster. And that's a pretty big nerf. Whoa. So Aztecs used to be very top of S tier ever since, they came out in AOC. So, where does this nerf put them? It drops them all the way from the top of S tier all the way down to S tier. Yeah, they're still S tier, guys. Aztecs and Arabia, Arabia plays to every single strength of Aztecs. Aztecs are aggressive. It's a map that favors getting map control early on and then just kind of snowballing that. And are they going to be like in KOTD where they were banned like 90% of the time? Probably not. It's definitely a lot closer at the top, I feel. And I don't think you can say anymore that Aztecs are like the best 1v1 Arabia civ, but they're still up there. They are still good at all the things that they've always been good at. Very good for drushing, which is very popular these days, especially like the early drushes. The fact that your units produce a little bit faster, you still do have faster working farmers. Yes, it was nerfed, but you still have them. And the extra gold, all of that is just huge eco bonus early on. Monks are going to be amazing. Eagle warriors are going to be amazing. And so, like I said, everything that Arabia is about, Aztecs are like amazing at. Now, if this was my clown tier list, Aztecs might even be dropped down a little bit more. But on Arabia in particular, Aztecs are still going to shine here. So they're still going to be an S tier. Berbers. Berbers, I'm going to throw in B tier. Personally, I like Berbers. I think they're a really fun civ to play. They haven't really received any major changes. Janissary got buffed a while back, and now they're actually a very legitimate unit against, like, especially foot archer civs, like Britons or Ethiopians or something, because you can just chase down the crossbowmen. But you don't have an early eco bonus. The faster moving villagers does not really net you any noticeable income advantage. Like, it's a very, very slight one. It's mostly a defensive and utility bonus. And then, Castle Age, you really start running as Camel Archers are sick, especially in Castle Age. And your cheaper stable units are amazing. Lots of flexibility there. You can even go for crossbowmen just fine in early Castle Age. But they still are going to struggle against really strong Halberdier civs. And that, combined with their lack of early eco bonus, does kind of force them to be no higher than B tier. But it's a civ that, like, if you're playing 1v1 Arabia, like, you're going to be fine randoming them. And actually, I should probably explain at some point what the difference between the tiers are. So S tier are going to be like the civs that if you're tryharding, you're going to want to, like, for ladder, you're going to be picking these civs, like, actually actively picking these civs if you want to go max tryhard. If you're like me, I kind of want to try hard, but I also want to try out different things and have fun. So that's going to be the A tier civs, where it's like, if you're seeing like a civ draft for like a 1v1 Arabia tournament on like the ladder version of the map, like, you're going to see these civs all the time, but they're just not quite like the constant pick. B tier civs are going to be the ones that, like I said, you're fine randoming. Like, if you just roll them when you're playing 1v1 a random Arabia, Like, you're going to be fine with that. You'd be like, okay, I got Berbers. That's fine. I can make this work against most any civ. But you'll feel a little bit outclassed by, like, the S tier civs especially. And then C tier are the civs they're like, eh. Honestly, they're mostly alright. It's just that they're outclassed by most of the other civs. It's less about the civs being awful and more the civs just being outclassed. And then D tier is, it's the civ that you don't want to get, as a hint. Anyway, all that aside, Berbers, they're alright. Britons, A tier. They're always an A tier Arabia civ, man. Maybe they were bumping, close to S tier back when it was like Drush Fast Castle all the time, when Arabia was a lot more wallable, and melee pathing was a lot worse. But that is no longer the case, and Britons, they're still going to be great at drushing. Faster working shepherds really gives you a lot of consistency in your Dark Age. And then the faster working archery ranges and extra range, Britons have always been great. They still do run into the problem of, one, a little bit of lack in versatility. I mean, they're an archer civ, right? You're expecting archers against them, and if your civ is well equipped to dealing with archers, then Britons are going to struggle. It's not like it's unwinnable. In fact, I'd say Britons are a lot more comfortable against anti-archer civs than, say, Mayans are. But still, it's not too fun going up against a civ like Goths or Vietnamese with Britons. And then they also lack mobility. Your best units are archers, infantry, and siege units. All those ones are slow, man. Their cavalry line is very weak. Yes, you do have a complete blacksmith, cavalier, and husbandry, and light cav, but that's actually still not all that great. So, for that reason, they're going to be an A tier, but certainly, if you're a person that gravitates towards archer civs, Britons are still going to do you solid. Bulgarians, ooh boy, civ that received a lot of changes recently, and by a lot, 2. But they're a civ that nobody ever wanted to play alongside Tatars, but they got some pretty big buffs recently, and that is their blacksmith tax, as well as their siege workshop tax, cost minus 50% food. So that's a pretty nice buff, and I think it does land them a spot in B tier. Now, because they're a new civ and one that had a lot of changes worked on them recently, this is something that I've played a lot of. I played a lot of 1v1 Arabia with Bulgarians, and they're honestly fine. They're not A tier, but they're totally reasonable. You do have to play a little bit differently with them because you don't have crossbowmen, which is obviously a big problem for generic 1v1 Arabia play. But you can open men-at-arms, and you're a little bit predictable in doing that. But honestly, it's really strong to instantly get that men-at-arm upgrade. It means that you can just mine 10 gold and still make 3 men-at-arms. You don't have to get the 40 extra gold. So what you can do is you can actually go men-at-arms into scouts because you're just not spending that wood and villager time mining gold, other than just 10 gold, but you can just send 1 villager to do that. So it's actually a lot more viable with Bulgarians than it is for other civs, and this has also helped if you want to go for a lot of scouts in Feudal Age or even skirmishers. The cheaper blacksmith upgrades on the food cost is very nice because you save resources, you're better able to get to Castle Age, and then of course you have a super strong army composition with knights potentially getting upgraded to stirrups, which are literally the fastest attacking land unit in the game. And then you have that affects your hussars, which it makes you insane in late game, fully upgraded halberdiers. And then something that Bulgarians are always going to shine with is that they are really good against eagle warriors because they're versus Aztecs, and the Aztec guys I'm gonna go for eagle warriors, and then you're just okay, I have two-handed swordsmen with 8 melee armor. Yeah, they're really strong in that, but you have to play them differently, and they're a little bit predictable early on, and I really think that they're never going to be A tier for Arabia, but they're going to be a lot stronger on closed maps. Their monks are also pretty bad. Missing the last archer armor upgrade isn't amazing, but you have siege. That's pretty strong, so they're honestly a solid B tier civ. Kreposts are great for taking map control, all that stuff. We're already almost 10 minutes into the video. I need to speed this up. Burmese. They're going to be B tier. Arambai did receive a nerf recently, but it honestly barely did anything. They fire, I think, 10% slower, but Arambai are still insane, and a lot of civs, a lot of melee-heavy civs, like Bulgarians, for instance, are going to just struggle to deal with Arambai. And yeah, they can really snowball games out of control, especially Arambai plus Mangonel in the mid-game. Kills everything. pretty much. But they are going to struggle a lot against archer civs because your skirmishers are so bad with missing the second armor upgrade, being the only civ to miss it. But you still do have other options. It's not like you have to go for a Rombai every single game in every single situation. Your men at arm rush is fantastic. Your free wood upgrade bonus is solid. And you have great monks. You have reasonably good siege, good cavalry. Manipur cavalry can be really nice in the late game. Elephants are always an option in certain scenarios. And then, you have really strong champions, halberdiers, all that stuff. So it's a civ that is surprisingly versatile in what it can do. But kind of like Bulgarians, they're never going to be higher than B tier because you just have such a weak archery range. But still, they're a civ that, in the right scenario, they can just, clap civs that would otherwise be way higher. It's just they're kind of polarizing, even much more so than Britons. Byzantines. I've usually put them in B tier, but honestly, I feel like I can't justify anything less than A tier, because it's they have almost no bad matchups. In fact, I don't think any matchup is especially bad for them. They're just solid, right? They're a civ that, I think they're the least played Arabia civ or something like that. I remember seeing a stat that said that somewhere. But I feel like that's just because people don't really like the play style of Byzantines, of just being a lot more passive, a lot more value-oriented. And not because they aren't really good. Because especially since cataphracts got their upgrade costs reduced, they're a viable unit. I mean, if you're playing Byzantines and you're making mostly trash units, you'll have the gold to burn on cataphracts. But you also have arbalests, good monks, siege ram, cheaper Imperial Age can help mitigate a lot of strong eco bonuses. A civ like Aztecs, or even Britons, they'll really leverage their eco bonuses in the mid-game to get a faster Imperial Age, and then can get a really strong timing attack with elite eagle warriors or arbalests with bracer and chemistry. That's sort of what the point of the eco bonus is when it comes to mid-game. Yeah, you don't actually get an eco bonus with Byzantines, but the cheap Imperial Age pretty much means you get to keep up with those civilizations. And with the power of your cheap skirmishers, usually the fast imp civs are archer civs, because it's really hard to go fast imp at plus cavalry or infantry. And you can really make it work pretty much all the time. Just a really strong overall defensive, flexible civ. And I feel like I've just relegated them to B tier for far too long. I'm sorry, Byzantines, you deserve to be A tier. Celts, also going to be A tier. Also, guys, by the way, literally all but, I think 6 civs, all but 6 civs are going to be at least B tier. The Arabia balance is, the best it's ever been overall. So these are going to be very crowded, A and B tier especially. But that's a good thing. That's where most civs should be. Anyway, Celts are A tier. Yes, they did get their drush nerfed recently, where you no longer get the extra speed in Dark Age. You have to wait till Feudal Age. But honestly, that's fine. Yeah, it was really strong for Celts to go for that drush, but their men-at-arm rush is still super strong. And then, Celts, they're Celts, man. Mangonels and TCs, eating and all that stuff. It can be really hard to deal with that whole playstyle. It's really annoying to play against. So many Hoang wannabes on ladder, man. But you don't even need to do that. I actually think the best way to play Celts is not Hoang style, but sort of a faux Hoang style, where you go for some early mid-game pressure with siege, monks, knights, pikemen, whatever, depending on what you're up against. But then you add extra TCs behind that. You use the map control you get in early Castle Age to make up for the fact that your late Castle Age is absolutely awful because you don't have Thumb Ring or Bloodlines. And then you want to transition, obviously, into infantry and siege in late game. But, yeah, they still have that very weak window in late Castle Age to early Imperial Age. But other than that, they're still just a really strong, solid civ. And it just feels pretty good playing them, and definitely good A-tier civ. Chinese, S tier. Yep, they're still great. I know I put them in A tier for KOTD Arabia, but that was in the context of a super open Arabia map, and the fact that it was a tournament that actively encouraged laming. Yeah, Chinese are still going to always be a little bit weaker to lames and having really bad maps, but on ladder that's not too much of an issue, at least in my experience. The map gens aren't usually that bad still. And that aside, Chinese have an insane eco, and they can do everything, man. Super broad tech tree. A very strong, inherently powerful option with the Chuko Nu, and really, broad trash, tech tree, the cheaper technologies, just it allows you to counter pretty much everything, and you can just stay ahead of most other civs. And like Aztecs, Chinese can get ahead, and especially like mid-game, like Chinese are super strong, and they can just snowball that to victory. Unlike Aztecs, they're not super strong in like Dark Age or even early Feudal Age because they're going to be a little bit more passive. But they, on the flip side, they have a stronger late game, especially when it comes to trash. But yeah, Chinese, if you want to play like one civ on Arabia, Chinese might be one of the best civs for doing that. So long as you can get their start right. I know it's a tricky start for new players, but if it's something that you can master, and honestly, it's not that hard to master. There are plenty of guides out there if you're struggling to get that right. Just make sure that you have an extra villager on sheep, and that's pretty much it. Just make sure you get the sheep going as quickly as possible. Humans, a civ that you can literally, like, they can feel S tier and they can feel D tier. So we're going to split the difference and put them in B tier. They're literally like a one-trick pony. You go for the 2 TCs, and then you go Castle Age, and then you go Kipchoks, and then you snowball with cheap Kipchoks and a quick Imperial Age, and then Trebs, and then win the game. And if that doesn't work, you die. And it's kind of like, if you have an amazing map, or at least like a pretty good map, the cheaper, or not cheaper, but stronger palisade walls help you survive so much. And the fact that your second TC is also a defensive tool, just make sure that you mine extra stone in case you're getting tower rushed, because if you drop the second TC, you can't afford a tower. But you have, just if you're conscious of that, I mean, humans can totally snowball the game out of control, but they're super predictable. And some civs that can do fast castle, like if you're up against humans and you know how you can exploit them if they have like a vulnerable map, if you're a civ like Celts, you can just go fast castle and you just kill them with mangonels in early Castle Age. But, some civs can't do that, and sometimes humans can get a really good map or just good defense off, and it can be really frustrating to play against, to be honest. It's a very, like, swingy civilization. You're probably not going to, like, want to pick them if you're trying to climb, because it's such a weird, like, different playstyle. But there's no denying that it can be very strong in the right circumstances. Ethiopians, B tier. Some people might put them in A tier, and they're definitely very strong in team games, especially. But in my view, they just lack that eco, and they lack mobility. Kind of like Britons, I mean, their fellow foot archer civ, Britons have a similarly strong early game, but they also have that really great eco in the mid game. And yes, they don't have the siege options that Ethiopians do, but just having that eco is so important in my view, because especially as archer civ, you really want to get a fast Imperial Age. And Ethiopians aren't really that great at that. That said, Free Pikemen is great, as they complement your archers very well to help deal with knights. Showtails did get a buff, I think, a little while ago. They're a little bit cheaper, a little bit more viable, but still very expensive, and their siege is amazing late game. Their civ that has a very strong military. It's also very expensive, and your cavalry is just really, really bad. So, yeah, I'm going to put them in B tier. I do really like this civ. And again, if you're a player that gravitates towards archer civs, you can totally pick Ethiopians and do just fine. I just think that I kind of like other civs that do what they do a little bit better, like Britons and some others we'll get to. Franks! Nope, not S tier. Sorry, Franks. A tier. Yeah, to me, Franks might even be the top of A tier. They're just so solid. Like, you can do the same thing with Franks every single time, and it's super intuitive to how to play the civ. It's very straightforward, but it works against, like, almost everything. What I really like about Franks is that you can play the same unit comp, or at least similar unit comps, both offensively or defensively, depending on what you need to be doing. Like the farm upgrades free, the faster working foragers, like those food bonuses are always applicable, like no matter what you're doing. They can help you get to Castle Age more quickly, they can help you churn out extra units in Feudal Age, and it's just such a universally useful bonus. And then cheap castles, again, you can drop a cheap castle offensively to pressure out your opponent, or you can drop one defensively to keep you from dying. So it's really, really nice. That said, Franks, the reason they're not S tier is that I really feel like they have a lot of situations where they can struggle. They can struggle a lot against good cav archer civs in mid game because your skirmishers are absolutely awful. And that sort of leads me to late game. Franks have awful trash. You have fully upgraded halberdiers, but your light cav are pretty underwhelming. They end up having less HP than just generic light cav that have bloodlines, like, say, Chinese. Yes, they're produced faster with chivalry, but eh. And then your skirmishers are absolutely bottom tier, like literally the worst skirms in the game, alongside Celts and Turks if you're up against, like, Franks and Celts have worse skirmishers than Turks, unless you're up against cav archers, because elite skirmisher has extra bonus damage against cav archers. But that's how bad Frank skirms are. So you can really struggle. Also, you miss Siege Ram. So Siege Ram and Elite Skirmisher are both super important against strong archer civs. And normally, Franks can still deal fine against, like, the foot archer civs, with just cavalry being really good in that regard. But if you're up against, like, a civ like Cumans, and you're not able to pressure them early as Franks, like, you'll just get mowed down by Kipchaks, and it'll be really unfun. Or if you're against a civ like Burmese, dealing with Arambai as Franks is not very fun. So that is really the only thing that holds them back from S tier. But that aside, they'll, like, always have a shot. They're Franks. Franks! And we are over 20 minutes into this video. I talk way too long. Moving right along, Goths will be our first C tier civ. They got nerfed to where they have this really weird change where you get Loom researching instantly. So you can research it literally at the beginning of the game. And it won't, like, cost you any idle time. But it's just, well, actually, I think it technically is like 2 seconds or something like that, but it's like you start with free loom, but minus 50 gold, and you can just kind of choose to get that whenever you want, and then you can essentially click up with an extra villager, or a villager earlier, however you want to go about doing it. And they're amazing at laming, and they can be really, really unfun to play against, what do you know? But they're still so one-dimensional, they still lack any sort of mid-game eco bonus. Like, you get one extra villager whenever your opponent gets loom. Whenever your opponent decides to get loom, that is when you get an extra villager. And, like, one extra villager at the end of Dark Age in, like, 99% of scenarios is not an amazing eco bonus. Like, it's nice, but it's not amazing. And you have awful defenses and then no eco bonus, and then you're super, super one-dimensional. So, of course, you'll always get situations where you're, like, Goths up against Chinese or Mayans, where you're like, ha ha ha, Huskarl spam, lol. But there's also a lot of civs that can deal with that super well. So they're very, very polarizing. I know at lower levels, Goths are super oppressive, but really that's a matter of you need to learn how to be you need to learn how to be aggressive to deal with Goths, because you can't just let them sit back and boom. And lower level players tend to not be very aggressive or not very good at being aggressive, like, especially. So that's kind of the problem there. I've said in a previous video, I don't think that's a very good design for the civilization, but it is what it is. And at least at higher levels, Goths are never going to be something you want to pick actively. Huns, A tier. I mean, Huns are Huns, right? You have really strong early game, mid game, like especially mid game, but you really lack that defensive capability. Not having houses is a big problem in that. You just can't play defensively as well. And then your cav archers, sometimes they can be harder to get up and running. Cav archers are not really worse in DE than they were on Boobly. That is actually a myth. It just comes down to the animation looking different, and that being harder for some old school players to, like, get used to, but they weren't actually nerfed in any way. So you can still go for cav archers all the time. Tarkans can be really strong. Your knight play is going to be great. You can just have tons and tons of options in the early to mid game. But you're also going to kind of struggle a little bit if you're going to be put on the defensive. There are civs that are better at being aggressive, like, say, Aztecs. And if Huns are forced to be on the defense, then you're really bad siege and not good monks and missing +4 defense for your halberdiers and +4 defense for your skirmish. It can be a big problem. That said, if you want to go into ranked and play Huns every single game, like, you'll be fine. They're just a really good overall civ. People know how to play them. People love playing them. I love playing them. But I don't really think you can say that they're S tier. Especially not in a meta that's dominated by drushes, which is something that Huns can do, certainly, but it's not something that they're going to, like, excel at. Incas. Gonna be an A tier. They don't need to go for a villager, men-at-arm tower rush with blacksmith upgrades, but you'll end up seeing that a lot. It can be really unfun to play against, but it's a very strong strategy, it must be said. But you don't even need to play them like that. You can just play them like a normal civ, and wow, they're actually pretty good. Super flexible, fully upgraded halberdiers, fully upgraded skirmishers, and then you have the Kamayuk and Slinger, both of which are excellent units in their correct situation. But you need to be pretty smart in how you tech, because the way that Incas work is it's kind of like Byzantines, where you're more focused on countering what your opponent is doing than like doing whatever in and of yourself, like a civ like Franks or something. But instead of Byzantines having like the cheap ways of dealing with everything, Incas have like more expensive options, but are stronger units in their own right, if that makes any sort of sense. And you do, of course, miss cavalry, so that can be a little bit of an issue. Eagle warriors are really good in general, but your Eagle warriors are not, in general, as good as Aztecs or Mayans. So I don't really think that they're S tier, but they're just a really strong, flexible civ. They lack kind of an eco bonus, though. Like, yeah, your houses have more space, and you get the free llama, which is nice. Like, your Dark Age is very smooth as Incas, but you don't have anything in the mid-game. Cheaper castles can be nice as well, but yeah, in a lot of cases, you'll feel like you're playing Aztecs or Mayans, but just a little bit worse, which definitely prevents them from being S tier, in my opinion. But still, very strong, solid, flexible civ. Indians, I'm so sorry, you're our only D tier civ. Indians aren't very good, man. They were C tier, and then they got nerfed for team games. So now, but the team game centric nerf ended up hurting them a lot in 1v1 because your imp camels have effectively +1/+1 less pierce armor. Because you used to have 3/5 armor fully upgraded for your camels, and now you have 2/4 armor fully upgraded, so it's literally like minus +1/+1. Like, that was like the only thing they had going for them. Like, yeah, Indians feel good if you're playing against Huns or Cumans or something like that, but if you're not against a cav-heavy civ, your camels are going to be very sad. And yes, you have a fairly broad tech tree, but there are so many situations where you want to have knights, and then not having knights is a huge problem. Eagle warriors, in many ways, can make up for the lack of knights. Camels don't as often. And in fact, you're absolutely awful against Eagle warrior civs, which are going to be very common, so that's not too great. And then against strong archer civs, the camels, again, are fairly underwhelming. But, it's not like it's hopeless with Indians, but I honestly feel like I would play the other 34 civs over Indians if I, play random or whatever. Like in a vacuum, I'd rather play literally every other civ. So unfortunately, it's not like a massive gap between D tier and C tier, but I still kind of feel like it is there. Italians, C tier. They got a change a while back where condos were a little bit better. They're also affected by Pavisa, but other than that, they're not bad. They're really straightforward in terms of you have the cheaper age up, which is nice. It's just, always useful. And Genoese crossbowmen can be really sick if you can get them out and running, but it's kind of hard to do that. Even with the buff they got where they train faster, it's still kind of hard to get them up and running. And it's just, you have a broad tech tree, but you just don't have enough bonuses that are relevant on land maps. Like water maps, obviously, they're like super duper S tier, very top of the pack. But on land maps, they just don't really have enough going for them to be anything above C tier. But like if you random Italians, it's not like, oh no, I'm totally screwed, I can't do anything. You have a broad tech tree, and you have the cheaper age up bonus, so you can make it work. You just have to be a little clever or something. Japanese. Going to be in B tier. I think just the definition of a solid B tier Arabia civ. Your early game is excellent. The faster attacking men-at-arms are absolutely horrifying to go up against. But then, of course, you don't have anything going for you in the mid-game, and your late game can be a little bit lackluster as you're lacking a super strong power unit other than generic fully upgraded arbalests and super strong halbs. But that's not super amazing, especially off the back of not having a very good mid-game eco. But still, their early game is insane, and they do have a broad tech tree, and Yasama keeps can be amazing for securing map control in the late game. and your halbs are awesome. So yeah, lacking good cavalry in the late game is a big issue, but they're tilted more towards like early game and like grindy games, because cheap halbs and fully upgraded, or not cheap halbs, but super strong halbs and fully upgraded skirmishers can easily like win you in post-imp no gold scenarios. But they definitely feel outclassed by some of the higher rated civs on the tier list. Khmer got hit with the big nerf bat. Their farmers are now slower, and they're battle elephants. Battle elephants, the letter B is important here, even though they're an A tier, Kappa. But yeah, I don't know. Khmer are kind of a weird civ. You can't really go for elephants much in 1v1s. It used to be that their Hussar spam was like absolutely insane in late game. I mean, there's a very memorable game, Game 7, Leary versus Yo KOTD semifinals, where Leary beat Yo with just the power of 80 Khmer farmers in Imperial Age. But that has been nerfed. They do have slower farmers now, and elephants are worse. And you have Arbalest with Bracer, but you don't have Thumb Ring, and that is pretty feels bad, man. And your halbs are slow and miss the last armor upgrade. Like, they have a really strong eco, but you're not going to be as great offensively. Like, you're not going to be seeing drushes from the civ all that often. You can go for a drush, you can go for a men-at-arms rush with Khmer. There's nothing stopping you. But doing that eliminates the eco bonus you would get of otherwise skipping the barracks. So it's not like you can just blindly up against Khmer say, oh, I don't have to worry about a drush, because that will likely get you killed sometime. But in general, yeah, you're going to want to make use of that, all those wood savings, and that does sort of limit how amazing you are in early game. But still, super strong eco. Early Imperial Age with Arbalests and Siege Rams can be super good, and their late game Hussar spam is still very strong, so definitely still A tier. Koreans used to be a C tier civ, but honestly, I'm going to put them in B tier now. They're not bad. The free armor upgrade is really good. It's actually really good, especially with war wagons, which are insane. They're fairly cheap now with all of the buffs that Koreans got to their wood costing units getting cheaper. So war wagons are, they're pretty darn cheap. And with the free +2 defense, that means as soon as you build a castle, like if you're going for like fast castle war wagons, which is actually possible on Arabia because Koreans have such strong defenses. Yeah, you're looking at something with 5 pierce armor in early castle age, and that can just wreck archer civs. And in general, they are a fantastic anti-archer civ. Problem is, their cavalry is awful, and they don't really have an amazing eco bonus. They have some very strong military bonuses, but they don't really have an amazing eco bonus, and they don't have that mobility, which can just be so important in long, drawn-out games. So that's definitely what's keeping them from being an A tier, but if you adjust your playstyle appropriately to Koreans, they can be really, really deadly in the right scenario. So they're not a civ you want to sleep on. And I think that, again, if you roll Koreans playing random, you don't need to go for like a YOLO tower rush. I mean, you can go for a YOLO tower rush if you feel like it, but you're by no means forced to do that. Lithuanians, A tier. They were definitely S tier for like KOTD, but that was in a very, very, very open aggressive map. I would say that they're more A tier. They're definitely like a strong, solid civ, but they're so dependent on you getting relics in mid-game to sort of carry your army through the later stages of the game. So if you can't do that, then you're pretty sad. And if you don't get relics, then you're actually fairly underwhelming in a lot of scenarios without arbalests or like any real bonuses to your cav or eco to help you through. Paladins obviously aren't really much of a 1v1 unit. You really only like ever see paladins with civs like Franks or maybe Huns. And then Lithuanians, yeah, your trash is super nice, and you have a lot of very strong aggressive options with all of that extra food you start with. So they're definitely still an A tier civ. Also, the latest were nerfed, so they're not really as good of a unit anymore. They can be a very snowbally civ. Like, they can feel unstoppable, but that's also oftentimes not the case. And if you're behind with Lithuanians, it can feel really hard to, like, come back. It's hard to come back with the civ if you're behind on map control, because your siege is also really bad. So that can definitely be a little bit problematic. Not having Arbalest is obviously not super great, but your skirms are insane. Like, your late game in general, other than siege, is insane, especially if you get relics, but it's just that lack of eco bonus, I think, does hold them back from being S tier. Still a really strong civ, though. Speaking of missing eco bonuses, Magyars, B tier. I'd like to see some small change with Magyars. Some people think that Magyars are fine. Personally, I feel like they're a civ that should excel on Arabia. And they're not bad, but they're not something that you're like actively picking. It's a civ that it's fine to random them, but you don't really want to pick them. At least not if you're super tryharding. And I'd literally just realized that the Magyar Hussars have a bow. Like, see that bow right here? Maybe not, I don't know. But it looks like they should be able to switch into cav archers, man. No, that'd be super OP. But me getting distracted aside, yeah, Magyar's super strong scout rush, but it's very predictable that you're going for that. Yeah, you can also use the free forging for a men-at-arm rush, but then that's not quite as good because you have no eco bonus to follow it up. Again, strong spikes in early feudal age, early castle age, early imperial age, and then your post-imp is absolutely insane. Magyars have like literally one of the best post-imps out there, but no eco bonus. And no, cheaper scouts and free forging are not an eco bonus. It's like, no, Patrick, mayonnaise is not an instrument. Because those things are contingent on you being aggressive. You can't, like, drush... Like, going for a drush fast castle with Magyars is not that great, because you have no eco bonus, you know what I mean? If you open scouts, then you'll have an easier transition into castle age, but that is entirely contingent on you going for that strategy. And I'd rather play Franks most of the time, or Huns. But still, Magyar Hussars absolutely tear everything apart in late game, and they're pretty fun to play, so, you know. Can't hate on them too much. They're still, you know, totally viable. Malay, C tier. They're still a little vulnerable in like early feudal age. I really don't like going up against men-at-arm rushes when I'm playing as Malay. But they're still pretty strong in like late game. Yeah, your cavalry is awful, but you have trash two-handed swordsmen, which can be great. The battle elephant nerfs didn't do them any favors, but you can still make them work in like early castle age. Your eco can be insane if leveraged correctly, but it's just not something that's going to be, I think, the most consistent ever. And kind of like Chinese, they're a civ that really struggles if they get lamed. In fact, I think Malay are comparable to Chinese in a lot of ways, because they have the super strong eco, but it's sort of postponed a little bit. The super strong eco doesn't come into effect until like mid-feudal age, especially. It kicks in a little bit earlier, I think, for Chinese. But Chinese feel like have way more... Like, the Chinese are way more flexible than Malay are. And so for that reason, I definitely think Malay are gonna be in C tier. But again, if you random Malay, you just need to be very careful in early game, and other than that, you're probably fine. Malians, A tier. Gebettos got buffed recently, and that's like one of the few things I haven't had the chance to play around with. But especially with the frame delay being a lot less, I think you can honestly make them work in a lot of scenarios as like a strong support unit. You can think of Gebetto as like a replacement for Arbalest in certain situations. Yes, I know the units are very different, but just you have some sort of meat shield of like, say, Farimba Light Cav, and then instead of supporting them with Arbalests, you support them with Gebettos, if you're able to get to that. And then the Gebettos are going to tear through it like so much. Also, they're excellent for raiding. But that aside, Malians have literally one of the most broad tech trees in early to mid-game, super generally applicable eco bonuses that I like, cheaper wood cost on buildings and free gold mining. I really am partial towards civs that have very generally useful eco bonuses and broad tech trees, like Malians do. And you can do pretty much anything with them, and it's going to be pretty strong. Only thing keeping them from S tier is... early Imperial Age is a little bit awkward because you don't have Bracer, and you don't have Halberdier, and you don't have Siege Ram. And those three things are very, very important. Still, though, Champ Scarls definitely have their place where they're very good. Your cavalry is very strong. Having camels is a big plus. Having very strong monks as well, I think, is a little underrated, but it's definitely a strength of the civ. They're going to be one of like the best civs in Castle Age, and they're also going to be really strong in Feudal Age. It's just early Imp where they're pretty weak. Mayans. S tier. Mayans haven't really gotten any big changes in a while. And Mayans are great for the same reasons that Mayans are always great. Yeah, they're going to be suffering a little bit if you're in scenarios where you're not going to be able to go for like a fast castle, but Mayans are still very strong in Feudal Age. You have the longer lasting resources, which is very, very helpful in early to mid game. And then Plumed Archers can be really strong once you get them up and running. Obsidian Arrows, if you have a bunch of Arbalests, or Crossbowmen in Castle Age, you drop a castle, you grab Obsidian Arrows, you can instantly win the game if the situation, like, there are so many situations, and we've seen this play out a lot in World Cup 2v2. I know it's team games and it's a different scenario, but I don't think it's hard for you guys to imagine if you've been watching that, a situation where you have like 40 crossbowmen, boom, obsidian arrows. Oh, look, there goes all your town centers. Oops. But then, of course, you have Eagle Warriors, Plumed Archers, like I said. Those are like the 3 units you can make. Mayans are not very diverse in what they do. It's just the things they do very, very well, and they have a strong eco. So, definitely still an S tier civ in my opinion. Mongols, my favorite civ. A tier. Getting to fully upgraded Elite Magyars is like summoning all 5 pieces of Exodia, because you just kind of win the game instantly. Not in all scenarios, but in a lot of scenarios. Mongols, not really many changes for the civ in a while, but that's fine. I think the civ is fairly well balanced. You have a very strong early game with the faster working hunters. You can go for very fast up times. You can use that to go for scouts. You can use that to go for archers. Do whatever you want with it, honestly. And then you have just the Mangudai option that's really strong. Something that I think is underrated with Mongols is the fact that you have Arbalests with Thumbring. They're like one of the only step civs that actually has access to Arbalest, and that means that if you just are going crossbowmen in mid-game and just, for whatever reason, are unable to go onto stone, you can still just click up to Imperial Age and go Arb Siege Ram. Like, you can do that with the civ. Step Lancers are also an interesting option. I'm still not too sure when exactly you want to be using them, but they're there, and they're pretty good for Mongols, so it's something to consider. I've tried using Step Lancers with Mongols in particular against Eagle Warriors, and I've had some sort of success with that. It's something I'd want to do a little more experimenting with, but it's definitely an underused unit. Because against Eagle Warriors, it's really hard to get Mangudai up and running. So yeah, I think there's some room to experiment there. Mongols, they're not an S tier civ by any means just because you have no mid-game eco, and you're very reliant on Mangudai in the late game, but still, Mongols can just wreck anything. Persians, C tier. Again, it's a civ that's not bad, it's just I'd rather be playing the other civs. But with Persians, you have very strong eco, but it doesn't kick in until a little bit later. You're very much like guided into going towards cavalry, which they do have that's very good, but other civs tend to be a little bit faster in doing it, like Franks or Huns. Persians having camels is really nice, but Malians also have stuff like that, and again, Malians are faster than Persians. Persians have trash bows, which can be great in late game, but you still miss Bracer, so you oftentimes won't have the range available to you. You also miss siege engineers. You do actually have siege ram and bombard cannon, and hand cannons. Like, Persians, they're not bad. Like, I enjoy playing Persians, but you can also struggle a lot against Eagle Warriors because you're, stuck with long swordsmen. So yeah, that's not super great. And yeah, I don't really think I could justify putting them in anything higher than C tier, but I wish I could. I wish I could Persians. Portuguese. B tier. Used to be down in C tier. They got the buff where they have an even greater gold discount, and you now have technologies other than aging up research 30% faster, which can lead to some very nice timings. Honestly, they feel like a solid civ. You save a lot on crossbowmen and knights, both of which are very gold intensive. Also, siege and monks cost a lot of gold. So all of that's quite good, but you still lack like a super great eco bonus, because if you think about it in terms of like, okay, your double bit axe, horse collar, research 30% faster, that's not like that. They're really quick text to research anyway. If you think about wheelbarrow researching 30% faster, you're like, okay, that's like an extra villager. But an extra villager in late feudal age isn't that insane. Yeah, it's like all these little things can add up, but I don't really think I'd put them above B tier. Organ guns can be good in certain situations, but they're very awkward to use. I remember playing a game, I got so tilted. It was on Arena, but the same principle applies where organ guns can just, they can go from shredding everything to just like dying instantly because they're so clunky. So yeah, it's definitely an awkward unit to use. Missing Hussars annoying, missing Squires is really annoying, but other than that, your trash is pretty good. So yeah, definitely just solid B tier. Saracens! I'm gonna put them in B tier. They can feel S tier at times, but they're so reliant on you going for just market abuse, quick Castle Age crossbowmen, and then just nuking all your enemy buildings. Yeah, that's... The thing is, it's so imbalanced in that it can feel super OP or super useless. And that's because Saracens, one, they don't have like a persistent eco bonus throughout most stages of the game. And having the extra bonus damage against buildings doesn't help you win fights at all. It's just like, if you have won the fight already, you can just snowball the game out of control like insanely fast. So it's just not very consistent. And that's why I wouldn't put them in A tier. But you do have fully upgraded Hussars, you do have fully upgraded Elite Skirmishers, you have a very broad tech tree overall, but you miss Halberdier, and you miss Cavalier, and those are both very important upgrades to have. But still, they're solid civ. Slavs. A tier. Slavs haven't really gotten any changes in a while. Their Boyars got buffed a bit, but you're still barely ever going to see those. They're just a strong civ, man. Farming bonus is good. Their farming bonus actually looks better, if you think about it, because all the other farming bonuses like Aztecs and Khmer got nerfed. So Slavs look even better by comparison. But they're similar to Franks in a lot of ways. Good cavalry options. But compared to Franks are a little bit faster than Slavs. Their bonuses kick in a little bit earlier. But Slavs have a better late game. They have better siege than Franks. They have better monks than Franks. They have better infantry than Franks. But they don't have paladins. And obviously they don't have something like chivalry. And they're, like I said, a little bit slower. But if that whole playstyle is your thing, then you can totally pick Slavs and feel like a powerful civ, that big meaty civ. Druzhina is insane late game, and your cheap siege is also really nice. And like I said, the good monks is actually like one of the more underrated aspects of a lot of civs, and Slavs do have very good monks. And now Dash is barking. Oh boy. Anyway, we're pressing on because I don't feel like editing this huge video. And then we'll have Spanish here in the C tier, and I know Hera put them in D tier for his tier list a little while ago, like a couple weeks ago or whatever. I don't think they're that bad. I think Conquistadors are still going to be very strong in a lot of situations, and just having that completely open trash tech tree is really nice. But missing crossbowmen is such a huge issue. And Spanish are now a lot more polarized than they used to be, which I think is a little bit of why some people are especially turned off to them, because you're going up against a civ like Britons, and Spanish just feels so helpless, and then you go up against a civ like Franks, and then Spanish are like, yeah, Conquistadors kill everything. But yeah, it can feel very polarizing. Tower rushing is not something that everybody is comfortable doing, but it is a very strong strategy with the civ nonetheless. But you miss crossbowmen, and you don't have like an amazing eco bonus, so you have to play differently with the civ. Some players can make it work, some are going to struggle with that more, and I don't think they're D tier. I'd rather play Spanish than play Indians, but maybe that's just me. Definitely not an amazing civ these days. Alright, one interruption of Corgi barking later. We are back, and thankfully I had pretty much finished up on Spanish anyway, so now we can continue on with the hot new girl in town, and that's Tatars. Yeah, Tatars are S tier. They're pretty insane. Now, I've always really liked the civ. I think they're pretty fun. They are very strong. Are they the best civ for 1v1 Arabia? I don't actually think so. But that said, they feel a little strong. I think that, personally, I would change the bonus to when you complete a TC, or like when you build a TC, you get 2 sheep. That would actually be a really nice boost to them on Nomad and make them a very strong Nomad civ, which, I mean, I guess kind of makes sense with them, right? They're Nomads. But it also would mean that you don't get the 2 extra sheep in feudal age, which means you can't delay making farms by that much. But it still represents a very strong mid-game bonus for their booming, which is kind of where they needed a little bit of help. So personally, I'd like that change. It makes it less like insane from like, Dark Age all the way through Mid-Castle Age. But as it stands right now, they are absolutely insane. They're like Huns and Lithuanians and stuff, but they have a super good eco. They also have a pretty broad tech tree. They have access to hand cannons. They have siege ram. They don't have bombard cannon, but you do have siege engineers. You have Timurid siegecraft. The free thumb ring is really, really good. Something that I think is not really talked about that much with the Civ is that because you get Parthian tactics and thumb ring for free, if say you're going for knights or steppe lancers or whatever in mid game, something cavalry oriented, but then you want a ranged component later on in the game, if you want to make a switch into cav archers, it's a lot easier to do that because you have most of the techs researched at that point. If you're going for cavalry stuff, you'll have bloodlines and husbandry at that point. And then getting free thumb ring and Parthian tactics means that you just need to grab maybe a few blacksmith upgrades and then heavy cav archer, and you can actually make the transition happen. I've won a couple games like that. So that's actually really, really nice with the Civ. The Keshik is one of the best unique units in the game. It is insanely cheap for how good it is. It's kind of like getting a Cavalier, except they're better against archers and worse against melee units, but they're also, way cheaper. So that's, it's super good. The extra armor on your hussars is insane against ranged units in general. So the Civ is just so strong in so many ways throughout literally all stages of the game. There's no reason to not put it in S tier. But like I said, excuse me, they don't have Arbalest, so you don't have that power spike available to you. And I don't really think they, super outshine the other S tier Civs, but I do think that they are an S tier Civ. So definitely very, very strong. Yeah, they are likely to receive a nerf because they're just, I think, a little too good at too many stages of the game on too many different types of map. Whereas a Civ like Civs like Aztecs and Mayans are much more suited towards open aggressive maps. Chinese are kind of good everywhere, but they also have some very distinct weaknesses, especially on closed maps. Tatars are just kind of good everywhere. So yeah, that's definitely my kind of thoughts on the Civ right now. But have fun with them while you can. I think a small nerf is definitely justified, but I don't think the Civ is so out of line that it's easily very, very best. For instance, some people were saying that they're comparable to DE launch Cumans, and I don't think that's even close. Tatars aren't like an auto win Civ. If you played Cumans at DE launch, there was a free win against 99% of Civs. Only Mayans had a semi-okay matchup. Tatars, they're just a strong S tier Civ. So yeah, have fun with them while you can. Teutons, going into B tier. So Teutons, they're insane on closed maps. They're probably the single best Civ on closed maps. But their lack of mobility does hurt them on Arabia. You don't have husbandry, and your trash isn't that great. Your halbs are super good, but you miss bracer and I guess thumb ring for skirmishers. So your archer play is in general fairly underwhelming. And missing husbandry is a big deal. And you also miss siege ram, which isn't that great. And just the way the Civ plays out, it's very slow and methodical, and it can totally just grind down enemies. If you can sort of make your map into a closed map, if you can make it into a situation by smart walling, castle placement, points that you're attacking, if you can sort of turn the game into a closed map style, then Teutons are going to be really, really good. It's just you can't do that every time and not against every Civ. They're really going to struggle against the fast Civs, like Mongols or Tatars or whatever. And so they definitely have some sort of polarizing matchups here and there, but if you can get the situation right to where you can play to their strengths and not have to endure their weaknesses, they are still very much a viable Civ. Janissaries. It's the Janissary Civ. No, these days it's the Light Cav Civ. I debated between A and B tier, but honestly I'm going to put them in B tier still. Which is a big increase for the Civ. And, excuse me, the reason that I'm doing this is, your scouts are really, really good, but it doesn't really make up for the lack of elite skirmisher. Yeah, it means that if your opponent's going like straight archers or pure archers, you're going to be having a bit of an easier time. But if they just mix in like a bunch of spearmen, then you're really going to struggle as Turks, because it turns out elite skirmisher is a really important unit to have in early to mid game. And it's just such a difficult problem to overcome with the civ, and they're still just as weak in late game when gold runs out. I think additionally they are also just a bit weaker to civs that are super strong with ranged options still, even with the Hussar changes. Like, a civ like Britons or Mayans, if with a few adjustments, they can totally take down Turks without any real issue. And their Turks are still going to be very gold dependent. You can play them in a faster way if you go for cav archers and hussars, and that can be very good. But it's still very expensive to get up and running. You still miss Arbalest. You miss Onager, which is definitely a bit of an issue in a lot of situations. So I don't really think that they're A-tier material, but they're definitely strong B-tier contenders. Again, not what I would call the most balanced civ in the world, but it sort of evens out to being good enough. Second to last, Vietnamese, going in A-tier. Despite being on the other end of A-tier, I think you can think of the civ in a very similar way to Britons, except they have slightly different strengths. Vietnamese, they don't have the range of Britons, which means that Britons are going to be excelling more against melee-heavy civs, I would say, whereas Vietnamese are going to be better in anti-archer situations, like against Britons. Just because the extra archer HP, not to mention Rattans and imp skirms, like that's all sorts of redundant anti-archer stuff. But it also means they do have fairly strong trash units. What's unique with Vietnamese among most foot archer civs is that they actually have fairly reasonably good cavalry. Mid-game, you have all the cav upgrades. You have bloodlines, husbandry now. You can even go for elephants if you feel so inclined. In late game, you do miss Blast Furnace, which is definitely a bit of an issue for your light cav, which you also don't get Hussar for. But it's still far better cavalry than, say, a Britain's better cav than Mayans, Ornlu 2020. Better cav than Ethiopians. All that stuff. So that's, I think, definitely a strong point for the civ. They are good at laming, it has to be said. But also, they have a decent amount of options. All of that. Their unique unit's also really good. So I think a really strong A-tier civ. What's holding them back is they're still very focused on archers. So if you have a very strong anti-archer civ that is not also making archers, so like, I mean, a civ like Goths are going to do very well against them, right? They're going to struggle a lot against strong infantry civs in general. If they have high pierce armor, they're going to really struggle against eagle warriors. That whole sort of thing. Celts as well, probably. So yeah, they definitely have their weaknesses, but still a very good overall civ. And last but not least, we have the Vikings, who are not going in S tier because that's silly. They're going to go in B tier. Ornlu Vikings are insane. Free wheelbarrow handcarts, like, just the best eco bonus in the game. Well, I mean, yeah, probably, but do Vikings really do the strong eco plus archer play better than Vietnamese? Better than Britons? Better than Mayans? I don't think so. In fact, all three of these civs have great matchups against Vikings. They just don't have the tech tree. Their knights are just awful. Your cav in general is just awful. Berserks can be very strong if you can get them up and running, but they're so expensive. You usually have to do like a big 180 in your tech switch. And Elite Berserk is just so many resources. It's like 1,300 food, 550 gold or something along those lines. And you don't have Halberdier. Yeah, you have Chieftains, but now that's even more expensive. But, of course, all of that said, Viking Eco Bonus is like the best in the game. Arb, Ram Push, it's very predictable, but if it's so good that, you know, it can't be stopped, doesn't matter if your opponent see it coming, right? So again, to me, Vikings are one of those civs, like the rest of the B-tier civs, where they have situations where they'll feel really, really strong, but also situations where they won't feel as good. They also really struggle against bombard cannons. This is more of an issue, admittedly, on Arena than it is on Arabia, but it is still, I think, a relevant factor on Arabia. And because you do lack that critical mobility in late game and just lack of diversity in your tech tree, I would have to relegate them to B-tier, although some people do think they're better. But obviously, this is subjective. And with that, we have the tier list. I guess we should do some quick sorting of the civs. So this is the tier list overall, and I'm going to be switching the civs around a little bit, but this is going to be like very much just my opinion today, and it could shift based on the day. So don't take too much stock in it, but I still think it's worth saying like, oh, the civ's like high A tier or whatever, especially since we have A tier and B tier, which are so gigantic. So for S tier, I'm going to go Chinese, Aztecs, maybe Tatars than Aztecs? I mean, it's very, very close. These subs are all super good. I'm going to go with that for S tier. A tier, let's put Franks at the top. I think that's pretty reasonable. I think Britons and Vietnamese you can kind of put together. Maybe a little bit better than Huns, but it's obviously very close, and it's all pretty situational. Malians I might even put a little bit above Huns. I mean, that's all very, very close. Slavs, I think, should be up around here. Then maybe Incas, Lithuanians. I'd probably have Mongols, maybe Celts at the bottom of A tier. That looks pretty good. Maybe, no, I kind of like that. Yeah, this is fairly reasonable, I'd say. B tier, we are going to be putting, I think, Vikings, Saracens, Ethiopians, I think all are fairly similar in that they're archer-centric civs, but they all have like their different strengths and weaknesses. I think I'm going to do this order, and I think that's fairly reasonable. Then I think you have your civs that are like Magyars and Japanese, who I'd say are like high B tier. You could probably put Portuguese and Koreans up there a little bit as well. And then maybe Turks. And then like all these civs are, I think, a little bit more situational. Maybe Berbers over Turks. It's pretty similar, I would say. And then these four civs probably closer towards the bottom of B tier. I think we're gonna do maybe this. And that. Yeah. And then, let's see, C tier, let's put Malay at the top, and then Persians, Italians, Goth, Spanish, Indians. Okay, let's give this one little once-over. Yeah, I'd say that looks pretty good. So this is going to be my 1v1 Arabia tier list for December 2020. Hope you guys enjoyed. Obviously, this was quite the long video, so thanks to everyone who's stuck around for that. I will sell out my Twitch. It's going to be in the description below. I stream like 3 to 4 days a week, all the major tournaments, so definitely leave that a follow if you are only watching me on YouTube. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.